On the night of October 20th, 2021, two young couples were hanging out inside of a little home in the woods in Henderson County, North Carolina. The couples were Rachel and her fiancé Chris, and their friends Autumn and Jake, whose home it was. Rachel and Autumn were in the kitchen preparing to dye Rachel's hair. Jake and Chris were in the living room discussing the very strange sightings of a black panther that had been reported all over town in recent days. North Carolina does have big cats, including panthers. However, the panthers in North Carolina are typically of the brownish color, not the pitch black variety like the panther that was apparently prowling all over Henderson County. Nonetheless, Chris was absolutely convinced that he had seen this black panther, and so he'd begun to carry a gun. Jake was in the middle of telling Chris that he too was now carrying a gun around for the same reason when they were interrupted by Rachel. Rachel told them that she'd been trying to show Autumn a YouTube video when her phone had died, and so she asked Chris if he wouldn't mind going back to their apartment and getting her a phone charger. And as Chris headed to the door to leave, Jake said, "Hold on a minute," grabbed his flashlight and grabbed his gun, and told Chris he would tag along and watch his buddies back. Jake and Chris set out on the little path that connected their two homes, and then continued walking down the path to Chris's house. They went inside, got Rachel's charger, and then they left and stepped back into the woods. They were about 40 feet away from Jake's house when they suddenly heard a twig snap to their left, and so the two men turned to face the noise, and as they did, they heard another sound, a low, raspy growl. The bushes were literally shaking like some enormous animal was inside of them, and so the two men drew their and they aimed it at the bush. The bush continued to shake like whatever it was gonna leap out. And so the men just opened fire, and they kept on shooting until they heard a new horrible sound. And the second they heard it, they dropped their. It would turn out that was not a panther. After Chris and Jake had left the house, Rachel and Autumn decided to pull a prank. They had found some expired eggs in the fridge, and they had decided they would go hide in the bushes near that pathway and pelt the guys with them. When Rachel saw Chris and Jake approaching, she tried to crouch down lower in the bush, but as she did, she stepped on a twig. And at the same time, they tried to stifle their laughter, but that only made them snort and shake the bushes. And that combination of noises, the snapped twig, the stifled laughter, which sort of resembled a short raspy growl, and the shaking bushes, signaled to the guys that this was no prank. This was the panther, and if they didn't act, it might attack them. And so they drew their guns and they began to shoot until they heard Autumn scream out in horror. Tragically, by the time they had stopped shooting, it was already too late for Rachel. She had been shot to death. Law enforcement did an investigation into the shooting, and they declared it was just a horrible accident. And so no one was ever charged with Rachel's death. And to this day, no one has ever gotten solid evidence that that Black Panther even exists.